Imagine, for a moment, December 24th, 1971, Christmas Eve. For most people, it was a magical time. A moment for family reunions and celebrations. However, for Juliane Koepke, a German teenager just 17 years old, that date would transform into the epicenter of a nightmare so surreal it would challenge human comprehension of survival itself. It would be the beginning of an unbelievable odyssey, forged in the vast, unforgiving, and treacherous immensity of the Peruvian Amazon rainforest. Juliane and her mother Maria had boarded LANSA Flight 508, a Lockheed L-188 Electra, their hearts full of anticipation. Their destination: Pucallpa, Peru, where Juliane's father, a renowned zoologist, eagerly awaited them for the much-anticipated Christmas celebrations. The air journey promised to be brief, a mere quick hop before the warm and long-awaited family embrace, but the sky above that ancient jungle held an unspeakable fury, poised to unleash itself upon them. As the aircraft pressed on, tearing through the air toward its destination, the weather conditions deteriorated terrifyingly. A colossal tropical storm, known by local communities as a cyclone, began to form, relentlessly swallowing the horizon and transforming the blue sky into a menacing shroud of dark clouds. Inside the plane, the atmosphere of joy and anticipation was swiftly replaced by a palpable and escalating tension. Juliane, armed with the knowledge of the jungle she'd acquired growing up with her scientist parents, recognized the imminent gravity of the situation. Lightning, like incandescent veins of a colossal being, flickered menacingly in the darkened sky, foreshadowing the chaos to come. And then, hell opened up. In a searing instant, a thunderous bolt struck the plane's right wing head-on, transforming the Christmas dream into a flaming, out-of-control fireball in freefall. The engine exploded with a deafening violence, a sound that pierced the eardrums of everyone on board. The noise of tearing, twisted metal, mixed with the terrified screams of the passengers, echoed through the cabin. The acrid smell of smoke and fuel permeated every inch of the space, turning it into an absolute, suffocating chaos. Juliane, in her later accounts, would describe the sensation as being on a runaway roller coaster, plummeting into a bottomless abyss with no chance of escape. Amidst that indescribable terror and the plane's disintegration, an event defying all logic and probability occurred. As the aircraft tore apart mid-air, over 10,000 feet high, Juliane, miraculously still strapped into her seat, was flung from the fuselage into the swirling chaos. She recalled seeing, for a brief agonizing moment, her mother, still in the seat beside her, a look of helplessness and terror etched on her face, before darkness and the speed of the fall completely enveloped her. It was a dizzying freefall, a plunge into the unknown, amidst the dense and unforgiving darkness of the Amazon rainforest. And the most unbelievable thing of all, Juliane woke up. It was the next day, December 25th, Christmas Day. She was dazed, her entire body sore and injured, but incredibly alive. An inexplicable miracle, one that science would later try to unravel, pointing to the cushioning density of the tree canopy and the possible helicopter effect of her seat as factors that might have softened the fatal impact. But at that moment, it was just her and the Amazon, beneath a rising sun that barely managed to penetrate the exuberant foliage. Juliane's first instinct, upon realizing the terrible reality, was to desperately search for her mother. In despair, she called out, screamed, and dragged herself a short distance across the damp, leaf-strewn forest floor, but her pleas were swallowed by the oppressive silence of the jungle. Instead of her mother, she found only twisted wreckage from the plane and scattered remnants of other lives, strewn across a scene of indescribable devastation. The jungle's silence, a stillness punctuated only by the rhythmic hum of insects and distant animal calls, became the chilling soundtrack to her loneliness and despair. Her most visible and concerning injury was a deep gash on her arm, which quickly began to attract flies, a constant reminder of the imminent risk of infection in such a hostile and unforgiving environment. However, Juliane wasn't entirely unprepared for this apocalyptic scenario. Her childhood spent immersed in the jungle at her parents' research station had equipped her with crucial knowledge about the dangers and basic rules of survival in that wild environment. Rule number 1, etched in her mind since childhood, was clear: find water and follow a river. Rivers, in her experience, were like natural roads that, sooner or later, would lead to human settlements. This would be her sole, fragile hope amidst that green, seemingly endless immensity. So, on December 25, 1971, under the tropical Amazonian sun, Juliane's epic and solitary journey began. Without food, without equipment, with injuries on her fragile body and accompanied only by her own despair, pain, and an unbreakable determination. The first few days were a physical and mental hell. The suffocating, humid heat of the forest enveloped her, ravenous hunger gnawed at her insides, constant thirst made her delirious, and relentless mosquitoes attacked her without pause, leaving her covered in bites. She walked methodically along the banks of small streams, using her parents' teachings to differentiate potable water, carefully avoiding hungry piranhas and crocodiles lurking in the muddy margins. One of the biggest and most frustrating challenges was the search for food. Despite being in an environment of exuberant biodiversity, Julianne knew that most fruits and plants in the Amazon were poisonous for human consumption. In a desperate attempt to find some form of sustenance, she tried eating some frogs, but her body violently rejected them, causing vomiting and increasing her weakness. Malnutrition slowly set in, and her body began to visibly waste away, but the image of her parents, the unwavering will to reunite with them, propelled her with every painful step, in a continuous struggle against her own body and nature. The days dragged on agonizingly, transforming into endless weeks of agony and uncertainty. Julianne's wounds worsened with each passing day. The deep cut on her arm, now infested with blowfly larvae, caused excruciating pain and constant physical and psychological discomfort, draining her already scarce energy. With the few resources she had and the little strength remaining, she tried to remove the larvae, but the task was almost impossible, and the results were minimal, only momentarily alleviating the torment. The nights were a separate chapter in her ordeal. Solitary, plunged into a total and oppressive darkness, broken only by the glint of wild animals' eyes lurking from the shadows and the constant fear of the unknown. Every rustle of leaves, every sound from the forest, transformed into an imminent threat, keeping her in a constant state of alert that depleted her last reserves of energy. On the 10th day of her incredible ordeal, exhausted and on the verge of physical and mental collapse, Julianne was gifted with a sound that didn't belong to the jungle's natural symphony. It was the unmistakable roar of engines, a sound of civilization. She knew with a certainty that overwhelmed her, that she was drawing near, that hope had not died. Shortly after, her tired eyes spotted a small fisherman's hut by the river, an undeniable sign that the end of her nightmare might finally be near. Inside the hut, there was no one, but what she found there reignited a nearly extinguished flame of hope, an abandoned boat and a bit of gasoline. The possibility of escaping that hell now seemed real and tangible, a glimpse of salvation. But her body's weakness was so profound that she could barely move, much less push or operate the boat alone. So, she waited. And that wait, laden with uncertainty and a renewed faith in destiny, proved crucial to her fate. Finally, on the 11th day of her incredible journey of survival, salvation truly arrived. 3 Peruvian lumberjacks appeared, calmly navigating the river, and stumbled upon the young woman in her deplorable state, barely recognizable as a human being. Julianne, in broken and desperate Spanish, but with a voice full of conviction, managed to explain that she was the sole survivor of the terrible plane crash. The lumberjacks, initially disbelieving such a story but moved by profound compassion at the sight before them, immediately decided to help her. They took her downriver on a journey that was exhaustive but ultimately safe, back to civilization. Along the way, with gestures of care and the empirical knowledge of those who live in the forest, they treated her injuries as best they could, even using gasoline to disinfect her arm and remove the larvae, a rustic, painful method, but one that proved crucially effective in preventing a worse infection. Julianne was finally taken to a medical outpost, where she received first aid, and then to a larger hospital in Pucallpa, where she could get the necessary medical care for her multiple injuries and extreme exhaustion. There, in a reunion filled with emotion, relief, and tears, she finally reunited with her father, who was devastated by the tragedy that had struck his family, but immensely grateful to have her back, alive, against all odds. The news of her incredible and almost impossible survival spread like wildfire around the world, shocking and inspiring all who heard it. Julianne Coep, the sole survivor of Lanza Flight 508 that plummeted over 10,000 feet, became a living symbol of resilience and the unbreakable strength of the human spirit. Her mother, Maria, unfortunately, did not survive the crash. Her body was found days later, confirming the tragedy that claimed the lives of 91 people on board. However, Julianne, instead of letting herself be completely consumed by the overwhelming trauma, would use her experience not just to tell her story, but to continue her parents' work and legacy. She dedicated herself deeply to her studies, becoming a renowned zoologist, specializing in bats, and devoted a large part of her life to the conservation of the Amazon rainforest. The very forest that, paradoxically, almost took her life, but also saved her, granting her a second and precious chance to live. Julianne Koepke's story remains a vivid, poignant, and inspiring reminder of life's fragility, but, above all, of the immeasurable strength of the human spirit and the unpredictability of nature. It's irrefutable proof that, even in the darkest moments and deepest abysses, the will to live and the spark of hope can, indeed, perform the most incredible miracles. Her extraordinary journey continues to inspire millions of people around the world to never give up, no matter how insurmountable or frightening an obstacle may seem in their path. If this journey touched you and made you reflect on the strength of the human spirit, don't forget to subscribe to the Relatos de Alma channel. That way, you won't miss any of the next real-life stories of overcoming that we have to share. Join our community and keep getting inspired.